Professor Shelby, I have a question.
Go ahead, Joe.
You mentioned the attitude of earlier anthropologists, that these beliefs are just wrong, a primitive superstition.
Yes.
Well, my question is, weren't those early anthropologists right? Surely none of us believe in magic, do we?
That's a good question. What do the rest of you think about that?
I think a lot of people do believe in magic. How many people think it's bad luck to break a mirror? How many people go to fortune tellers for advice about the future? I have a Scottish friend who carries a rabbit's foot around with him everywhere he goes.
That's not the same, Rumiko. People who do those things just do it as a joke.
I don't agree. Some people are pretty serious about these things.
A small minority may be, but it's not widespread, is it? It's not the basis of our society.
Well, for the sake of argument, suppose we agree with Joe that the Azande beliefs of that time were mistaken. What follows from that?
It shows that their whole way of life was totally different from ours.
So you think we have nothing to learn from them?
Well, do you want us to start poisoning chickens?
Our job is to understand how other societies work, or worked, at a particular time. We might adopt some idea from a given culture, or we might not. But our first task is to understand what the idea really is. Joe, do you think that, if their beliefs are wrong, they're not worth studying?
Well, they'd be more interesting if they were right, wouldn't they?
Not at all. It's more interesting to see how their beliefs can make sense to them, even if they are wrong.
Don, you have a question?
Yes. Surely we can study the same thing for very different reasons. Joe thinks we should study something to improve our own way of doing things. Rumiko wants to understand the way they think. Professor Shelby wants to explain what holds their society together and makes it work. Why can't we say that these are all good reasons?
That's an interesting point, Don.
And I have a related question about this.
Go ahead.
I'm curious about Evans Pritchard himself. What was his motive for studying the Azande?
Well, motives are often complicated. Also, his attitude changed over time. In the 1930s, he seems to have seen himself as a scientist, objectively collecting solid facts. By the 1950s, however, he had decided that anthropology is not a science, but a matter of translating between two very different ways of thinking.
Did Evans Pritchard think of his work as pure research, knowledge for its own sake? Or did he think it would have some useful, practical result?
It's hard to be sure, but it's not impossible that he hoped for some concrete benefits in the real world.
I see. Thank you.
Well, time's up, I'm afraid. Thanks for your questions. Next week, we'll be looking at African concepts of the family.